South Africa has some of the richest and most productive farmland on the continent. It exports produce to other African countries and abroad, but most prime land belongs to a minority of people. Many black South Africans live like this, in informal settlements with little or no basic services.
What a contrast, what a shame. It is an insult for black African people not to have ownership of land in their own country of birth.
Land and who owns it is an emotive issue. Extreme levels of inequality in South Africa are a legacy of apartheid, where black people were forced off their land and denied rights to property. People occupy vacant land that's not being used. There isn't much space to move around. There's poor drainage and sanitation systems. They build their homes using either corrugated iron sheets, and some use anything they can find to build their shelters, like this one. Wandile Sihlobo was told this place belongs to a white South African, but black families have settled here illegally. He knows if the owner returns to claim it, he and others could be evicted.
I started hearing about land redistribution when I was a young boy. I'm still waiting for politicians to give us land.
People moving from rural areas into cities looking for jobs are fueling demand for decent housing and land.
Until we can find a way that the rural unrest and anger and grievances get a really effective channeling into a land movement, into a democratic national movement of rural people, I doubt we'll see those white farmers scared to the point they need to be to support land reform.
The governing African National Congress has launched programs to transfer farmland from white to black owners, for example, by buying land and then redistributing it. But not every farmer wants to give theirs up.
The issue of expropriation of land without compensation for development, it's something that we must also start. It's something that we must fast track as government, and we know the political oligarchies are going to fight against the ANC for that, but ours is to stand for our people. We are going to achieve victory at the end of the day. Our people are going to get land.
Opposition parties like the Economic Freedom Fighters, or EFF, say land redistribution is taking too long. They want white-owned farms seized. That's an idea that seems to be appealing to many black South Africans with no land of their own. But the EFF is also facing competition from the newly formed MK party, leaving the outcome of next week's elections more difficult to forecast. Haru, Mutasa, Al Jazeera, Durban.
Well, Wandile Sihlobo is a chief economist at the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa. He joins us now from Pretoria in South Africa. Good to have you with us. So, can we say apartheid has ended without addressing the economic legacy of apartheid?
Sammy, I think the point is more nuanced in South Africa. Take on this aspect of land reform. The idea that the African National Congress had in 1994 when they came into government was to say in their first 3 years of government, they will be able to transfer roughly 30% of the land that was previously in white South Africans for land reform purposes to black South Africans. And over time, they've moved that target year in, year out as they were struggling to meet it, to now targeted at somewhere around about 2030. But I think when you're looking it into perspective then and say, how far are we from achieving that target of 30%, which on its own is not the end of land reform, but it is a target that was set. And after that, we will continue. We are now at somewhere around about 25% of achieving that. So yes, there are pressures for land, but there's also some progress that has been made over time. But Semi, one of the most difficult things also that has happened over this time is that much of the land that the South African government has bought, particularly in the periods between 2006 up until today, it has kept in its books and not transferred it to beneficiaries with title deeds, so that in terms of commercial production, we could see the share of production by black South Africans also increasing.
Well, hang on, so Wandile, why is that? Why have they not transferred that ownership?
The difficulty on that, there is a sense that perhaps in the past, somewhere around about 2006, 2007, some of the land that the government was buying and transferring it to people, perhaps they were reselling that land back. And the government decided that perhaps the better approach on dealing with this, particularly on land redistribution, not the entire land reform progress, was to go on with some of the 3-year, 30-year leases that they were giving up to beneficiaries, which in my view was a mistake, because we could have come up with something like a first right of refusal, which some of our neighboring countries, like here in Namibia, people were using that. So we could have gone through that. But I think on its own, the process of land reform in South Africa is more nuanced than only just ascribing it to either a success or failure. There are pockets of success, there are pockets of failings, and I think right now we have to think about to say, can we transfer the land that is sitting on the state to beneficiaries with title deeds? And what should we be doing to accelerate land reform 30 years on into democracy for the next couple of years on that? And I think that's the discussion that is taking place in South Africa. But one important aspect within the land reform, this aspect that we have just discussed is redistribution. There's also another leg of it, which is land restitution, where there's been a bit of a more slow pace on that, where I think that the state needs to improve its delivery. A last leg of it has been a complete failure, which is the tenure reform, which talks about strengthening the Black South Africans' rights into the land ownership in the former homeland, and indeed in some of the land that I alluded to earlier. Those are all of the aspects that I think today we have to think innovatively as South Africans of saying, how do we ignite much progress on that?
Wandile Sihlobo, Chief Economist at the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.